My name is Nika Allgood. I am a wife and mother of 3 children. I'm an active Mormon. Right now I'm a gospel doctrine teacher in my ward. I'm here to talk about the experience of my middle child. Grayson is transgender, and he transitioned from female to male during high school. And that was not an experience I expected to have as a parent, you know. But as we talked together and he shared with me, you know, what he was feeling, I was actually the one who explained to him what it meant to be transgender and asked him if that was how he was feeling. You know, I pointed to his body and said, okay, here you're a girl, you know, who are you up here? And I kind of expected that he would say, well, I have a boy's brain. But he didn't. He said, I have a boy's soul. And that really struck me deeply, and I think that's true. Even when I talk about Grayson in the past, I always now use male pronouns because I feel like I always had a son. I didn't always know it, but I always did have a son.
My name's Grayson Moore. I'm from Syracuse, Utah. I am 19 years old. I'm a student at the University of Utah. I'm female-to-male transgender, and I'm a Mormon. It's really my mom that I have to thank for the reason that my transition to male went so well. But when I was younger, you know, living in Utah in a fairly sheltered Mormon environment, I had no idea what being transgender even was. I knew that I felt something wrong, that I felt more like a guy than a girl, but I didn't know that was a thing. And it wasn't until I talked to my mom for the first time and told her that I was interested in girls, and she had seen my behaviors, you know, that showed signs of gender dysphoria, of, you know, feeling that I was in the wrong body for my mind's gender. She had seen those things, and she knew what being transgender was, and so she did some research and talked to me and asked me if that was how I felt, and that's when it clicked, and I realized that I wasn't just alone, I wasn't a freak, I was a boy. And I have my mom to thank for the fact that that was able to happen so smoothly and at a relatively young age for me.
Once we figured out that he really did feel like a boy, we talked about, oh, did he want to wait till he was done with high school and transition before he went away to college? But we really didn't talk about that for very long because it was very distressing for Grayson to pretend to be a girl when he felt like a boy. And he felt like he was lying to everyone about who he was once he knew he was a boy. And so for him, transitioning was part of being honest. And we believe in being honest in all our dealings with our fellow men. And he just felt like to be honest with everyone, he needed to live and present as the boy he really felt he was. And so, you know, we helped him do a social transition. We helped him get a legal name change and, you know, went through his closet and donated all the girls' clothes to a thrift shop and bought him boys' clothes. I bought him a suit to wear to church. And he went in to talk to our bishop of our family ward. And I'm so grateful for that experience because as he was talking to the bishop and explaining how he felt, the bishop at the time had what I think was a moment of great clarity where he said, okay, what would it be like for my priests, you know, for the priests in my ward to have to wear a dress to church every Sunday and go to Young Women's and stand up and recite the Young Women's theme. And he understood that that would be hard for them, that would be distressing for them. And I think it helped him have a lot of compassion for what Grayson had been experiencing. Grayson has stayed active in the church through his transition. And it's been interesting to me as a parent. I want so much to protect my children from hard things. I want them to be safe, and I want them to have easy lives. And this has not been an easy thing for Grayson. But I felt like through these trials, he has had to pray, and he's had to rely on the Lord and rely on the witness of the Spirit, and go to the Lord for answers when there weren't just canned, easy answers for him. And as he's done that, he's developed a real testimony, and a testimony based on his own experiences. I mean, a lot of your children start out kind of with a testimony that's, I know my parents know the church is true, or I know my mom knows the church is true, and that's an okay testimony for a little kid to have. But at some point, every parent hopes that their child transitions from having that childish testimony to having an adult testimony. I know for myself that the church is true. I know for myself that God loves me and he hears and answers my prayers, because they've had those experiences. And through the challenge of dealing with being transgender, he has turned to the Lord, and he's gotten those answers and gotten a testimony and a witness for himself. And I'm happy that he has that testimony. I would have wanted to protect him from that trial, and I think the Lord let him go through, the trial of needing to transition, knowing that he would learn from it and be better and stronger because of it. It helps me see that Father in heaven is a better and wiser parent than I am. And I hope that I can carry that kind of wisdom as I go through trials in my own life, to see that even though I wish those trials would go away, that they can help me grow and rely more on the Lord, and grow in my testimony that as I rely on him, he will support and strengthen me. So it's been a gospel learning experience for me to have a transgender child.
The role that the church and the gospel has played in my transition has been, to a certain extent, a two-parted one, because on the one hand, when I was in the midst of severe depression and panic attacks due to my gender dysphoria, my faith in the Lord was pretty much the only thing that kept me going, and in some of the times when I struggled with, not being sure of what it meant to be who I was anymore, of fear of, what the future could be like, it was the Spirit of the Lord that helped me to know that I'm a child of God, and that I am a boy, and that it's going to be okay, and I don't know how exactly, but I am sure that the Lord will make good on his promise. On the other hand, the church obviously doesn't know entirely how to deal with people who don't fit strictly into the two boxes of, either you're female or you're male, and so there are a lot of things in the church that depend very heavily on you fitting into one of those boxes. And when I transitioned, that made for some awkwardness and some sort of being in limbo in regards to the church, because while obviously it would be dishonest of me and uncomfortable for everyone else to be participating in the female activities, I haven't been able to fully participate in the male side of things either. And so it's been a bit of a struggle, not really knowing where I'm going in regards to the church, because the church does tend to have, a very one-size-fits-all idea of, if you're a boy, you go on a mission, You go to college, you meet a wonderful woman, you get married in the temple, you have a lot of beautiful children, all that basic stuff. But for me, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to go on a mission. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get married in the temple, and I want to do those things. I want to be able to participate in the fullness of the gospel as the boy that I am, but because the church doesn't necessarily understand, and church leaders don't necessarily understand transgender-related issues, I have to just sort of wait in regards to some things, and I'm not sure if they're going to happen at all. So I just, to a certain extent, my future is in my leader's hands and not mine. One of the most profound and memorable spiritual experiences of my life has been just after I had talked with my mom, and she had mentioned being transgender, and that had made sense to me. That had explained what I'd been feeling. But I mean, the idea of transitioning from one gender to another it's a pretty daunting task. And so I prayed, of course, and I had prayed for so long for whatever it was, not knowing, just please to make it stop hurting, to be able to feel right as who I was. And, finally being able to ask the Lord, is this right? Is this who I am? Am I a boy? I received a powerful witness that said only two things, really. That, yes, I'm a boy, and it's going to be okay. And I know it, and I know the Lord knows it, and I cannot deny it any more than other people can deny the revelations they've had. I know who I am, and it would be dishonest to myself and to the Lord to pretend to be someone I'm not. Growing up in the church, the Spirit tends to be a kind of thing that you're immersed in. You don't really necessarily notice it. You notice it sometimes with the most prominent, when in seminary they do some challenge about, read the Book of Mormon and pray to see if it's true, and you do that, and I've always felt that confirmation that I know the gospel is true, I know this is the true church, and the Lord's looking out for me, and I've had those experiences throughout my life. So I guess I used to take the church for granted when I was younger, and it seems like a lot of people do, that they take the gospel for granted. And then when I transitioned, suddenly that was cast into doubt, that I would be able to participate in the blessings of the gospel, that if I had a less understanding leader, that I could just be rejected from everything I knew and loved, and it made me realize how much the church has meant to me all along, that it's been so formative in who I am, and that I know with certainty that the church is true, and the thought that because of something in who I am, something I can't change, that I could have lost the opportunity to fully participate in the church. It was a terrifying thought.
Sundays were tricky after Grayson transitioned. You have sacrament meeting, you have Sunday school, and then that third hour of church is so gendered. We split into all the guys go to priesthood and the girls go to young women's or Relief Society or wherever. And Grayson didn't have a place that he fit. After he transitioned, there was a while where he went to sacrament meeting and he went to Sunday school and he went home. And It's been easier since he's been at a student ward, because in his student ward he's been welcome to attend priesthood meeting. Because he's transgender, he doesn't hold the priesthood, and that's hard. I look at him and I see my righteous, worthy kid, and I look ahead and think, well, what's the path for a Mormon young man to get the priesthood, to serve a mission, to go to the temple, to marry in the temple, all of those things, and yet temple ordinances are gendered, and on church records, Grayson is still a girl, and it would be dishonest for him to participate in those ordinances as a girl when he's a boy. And so I know that he's worthy to go to the temple, and yet that's not really something that's on the horizon for him right now. I look forward with hope and faith to the day when there will be a way for him to participate in those ordinances. And I know it's hard for him to wait. I wish he didn't have to wait.
I've had pretty good responses from a lot of church leaders. My bishop in my home ward, while he had never dealt with transgender people before, because few people have, he was nevertheless very compassionate. I told him about my experience that I'd had, and he was able to put himself in my position to really feel some understanding for the situation I was in. And even though some of the higher leaders in the church are not always as understanding, having a supportive bishop means a huge amount in just terms of day-to-day church life. And my student ward has been a wonderful thing for me in the church, because my bishop, once again, has been wonderfully accepting and understanding, and has been trying his very best to do what's right for me, and it's been wonderful being able to be in a ward where I can just be one of the brethren, and I still don't have a home teaching assignment, and I still can't bless the sacrament and attend priesthood meetings and things, but I'm still able to have some of the blessings that come from the church and the gospel.
It's been interesting for me to see my own ward and to see how they have dealt with, my kid suddenly coming to church in a suit. It's been easier because Grayson has been willing to be very open about what's been going on with him. And most of the people in my ward have been kind. And the ones who maybe haven't had kind feelings have at least been kind enough to be quiet, which has helped, because I know that there are people who, when they come out or when they transition, don't feel welcome in their own wards anymore. And I'm so grateful to the brothers and sisters in my ward who were trying to be kind and understanding. I know that when Grayson graduated from seminary, in my stake they do a big seminary graduation, and the year that he graduated, they actually made video that was all the seminary graduates, and each of them, had a chance to share a brief testimony as part of that video. And Grayson was invited to do that along with all the other graduates. And after he graduated from seminary, the next Sunday when the bishop read the names of all the youth in our ward who had graduated from seminary, he read Brother Grayson Moore. And that simple kindness of using the right name, of using the right pronoun, of calling Grayson brother, has helped him to feel welcome at church. And by doing that, they not only helped him feel welcome at church, they made it easier for me to feel welcome at church. There are parents who see the rejection their children experience at church, and it hurts them. It hurts them every week. And I know that some of those parents try hard to hang on, but it is hard to hang on when every week you're cringing, waiting for the hurtful comments about the child that you love and support. And I'm very grateful for my ward that they've chosen to be Christ-like to our family. It's been a great thing. Grayson has a beautiful voice, and he sang with the choir in state conference after he transitioned and was welcome there. So they weren't trying to hide him.
So my parents, of course, were both wonderfully supportive and accepting, and they were a huge help in the whole transition process. I remember when we told my brothers, they were also so wonderfully accepting that my little brother, right away just started coming up with horrible suggestions for new names. That he suggested that we rename me Gruch, and I said, if we're naming me Gruch, then your name is going to be Doch. But yeah, it's wonderful that that's been able to be something that we can just, that's not an issue, that we can just be the brothers that we've always been.
So both of my other boys have been really great, really supportive of Grayson. I think because they had been, playing with him and interacting him for years and had seen his, very masculine focus and interest, it was easy for them to get their heads around, Grayson's a boy. And I know that they have felt very protective of Grayson, and it hurts them when people don't make the effort to use the right pronoun. So it's been great to have their love and support. It is a challenge for a family when they find out they have a transgender child. There's still just a lot that's not known about being transgender. We don't know a lot about what causes that. We don't know some of those basic things, and yet, as a parent, you have to, try to do what's best for your child. And my experience was that not transitioning, that, Grayson trying to fake it as a girl, which he had done for 16 years, and I felt like it was killing him. And so church policies, again, it's kind of frustrating for me. Some of those policies are in handbooks there's not ready access to for parents, but they discourage people who are transgender from doing, physical transition, hormones or surgery, kind of things. And yet, for me, it was clear that we needed to be pursuing some of those medical transition steps for Grayson, that it was an essential thing for his mental health. It was really killing him to not be a boy that he was supposed to be. And so we've gone ahead and pursued hormones for him. I mean, if you listen to his voice, he's a baritone now, and it's been, actually it was wonderful to see him go on testosterone and see what happened, because he was just struggling so much emotionally and struggling with depression. And I was really worried that maybe we were going to lose him. But going on testosterone hasn't let him be who he's supposed to be, and so it was wonderful to see the happy, creative kid that I knew he was come back. And as some parents of transgender children have a sense of loss when their child transitions, they kind of mourn for the son they used to have or the daughter they used to have. And I understand that sense of loss, but that was not my experience. For me, the experience was getting my child back. I got my child back in boys' clothes and with a boy's name, but that was the happy, bright, creative person I had known before that had kind of been submerged with the distress of not really being who he felt he was. So my husband is not a member of the church, and he is, the way he describes it was, raised by Hollywood liberals. And so for him, honestly, figuring out his child was transgender was not that big a deal. It's like, okay, we help Grayson transition, that's fine. So, I guess the challenge for me has been that, there were these religious issues for me that I needed to work through and, figure out how I was going to understand that. And he didn't really need to do that the same way. I talked with Grayson some when he was starting to transition about the church, and I let him know that I understood that it was hard to be a transgender Mormon, and that if he felt like he needed to leave the church, that I would still love him and accept him, that he didn't, being a member of the church wasn't a hoop he needed to jump through to earn my love. He had my love and he had my support. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him for choosing to stay. But as I've connected more with other Mormons who are part of the LGBT community, I've seen that that choice to stay is the right choice for some people and not the right choice for everyone. And that we still love our kids, they're still part of our family, they're still treated with kindness and caring, with trust. And we don't, as parents, always see the journey ahead of our kids. But we do what we can to help them along that journey. So for Mormon boys, there's that kind of standard path we talk about all the time. There's, go to the temple, you go on a mission, you come back, you get married, all of those things. And I don't know what the path is going to be for Grayson. I hope he has the opportunity to marry. I think he'd be a good husband. But if you think about the experience of Nephi going to get the brass plates from Laban, and Nephi and his brothers had tried a couple things that failed. And finally, Nephi goes into Jerusalem by himself at night. And what Nephi writes is he says, I was led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand the things which I should do. And so this was a time in Nephi's life when the Lord needed him to do something that wasn't on the standard plan, wasn't on the standard path. And Nephi didn't know what was ahead, but he went forward in faith, trusting that the Lord would guide him as he went forward. And I think what incredible faith Nephi had to be able to walk forward, not seeing the goal ahead, the path ahead, and yet doing what the Lord needed him to do. And I also think what faith and trust the Lord had in Nephi, that he could call him to do something that wasn't on the standard path. And I feel like Grayson's not on that standard path, but I feel like the Lord is going to lead him along, even if he doesn't know beforehand the things that he will do. And I know the Spirit will continue to lead Grayson. So before Grayson came out to just everybody, we actually did a Facebook post when it was time for him to transition to everybody, but before he did that, there were people we felt like deserved to be told in person, not find out on Facebook. And we told our bishop, he told some of his friends, we told our dear family friends, and we told our extended family. And I was kind of worried about telling my parents. They're older, they're quite conservative. But all of our extended family, including my parents, have just been great. They listened carefully. When I told them, you can understand how hard this has been for Grayson, they understood that. And so they've been supportive of him as he transitioned. I know when we first told my parents, my dad, the concern he expressed was that he was concerned about Grayson's safety. And he has reason to be concerned. People who are transgender experience a lot of violence in our culture. And I mean, as a mom, that's something I worry about. I want my kid to be safe walking down the street. I think my dad was concerned that transitioning would make Grayson less safe, and so his concerns were concerns based on love and care for Grayson. So I talked to him about, I understood that there was risks for Grayson to transition, but that not transitioning was also just a huge threat to his safety, that he wasn't coping, that he was bearing this huge burden of not being able to live authentically, to live who he really was. And as I talked to my dad about that, about the health and safety issues that Grayson needed to transition, he understood that, and he's been loving and supportive. And Grayson told me afterwards that he was worried about his transition. He was worried that he would lose friends and family, and he did have a couple friends that kind of walked away. But he said he's very happy that he didn't lose any of his family, that they've all been supportive, and kind of feels like, well, you can make new friends, but you you don't make new family the same way. So it's been a great blessing to us to have our family and our extended family be understanding and supportive. The proclamation on the family talks about how gender is an essential part of our premortal, mortal, and eternal existence. And some people have kind of used that to say, oh, well, then that means nobody can really be transgender. But for me, it actually helps me understand Grayson's transgender nature. I sincerely believe that he was a boy in the pre-existence, and that, yeah, we all come to Earth with bodies that are in some way imperfect. We have mortal bodies, and the imperfection in his body is that it's not, the gender of his body doesn't match the gender of his spirit. But it is my sincere belief that he will be a man in the resurrection, and that this is, for him, a trial of mortality that will be made right when all is made right in the resurrection. So prior to figuring out that Grayson was transgender, I would have characterized myself as kind of a passive ally for gay and lesbian and transgender people. I wasn't that actively doing things to help. But as Grayson has transitioned and I've become more involved with the LGBT community, and particularly Mormon LGBT community, I've seen that there are things that maybe I should have been doing before. I wish I hadn't have been a passive ally. I wish I had been a more active ally. I wish I had done things to make it clear that I want to help people feel welcome at church, that you don't have to look like everybody else, dress like everybody else, talk like everybody else. The Lord wants us all to be welcome at church. And for the people whose feelings have been hurt by someone at church, I'm sorry. And I hope they know that for everyone at church before who may have hurt their feelings, I hope they can find someone, and I hope that I can be someone who will make them feel welcome, and that I'll walk with them.
My name is David Moore, and I'm the parent of a transgender son. My son, Grayson Moore, was born female and transitioned to male, starting in high school with a social transition. And since then, he's undergone a physical transition. And he is LDS and has chosen to remain active in the church. And I know that's likely to be a difficult path for him. And it got me very interested in the intersection of being LGBT and being LDS. And so I became more involved in the LGBT community, at least peripherally, and paid attention to the work of Mormons Building Bridges to try and increase acceptance of LGBT people within the Mormon Church. And as I was reading about that and learning about that, I wanted to be able to be more of a participant, but not being LDS myself, I looked for another avenue to do that. And what I became involved in, first of all, is the Safe and Sound program that was a collaborative effort between the outreach resource centers located near me in Ogden and Mormons Building Bridges to provide homes for LGBT youth that have been kicked out of their parents' home. And that's a big problem all over the country, and it's also a significant problem here. LDS families are maybe equally or a little bit more likely to have their youth be kicked out when they come out. And my wife and I volunteered to become the first host family for Safe and Sound. So if an LGBT youth was kicked out of their home and the Safe and Sound program found out about it, we would take them in to our home. Hopefully they could at some point be reunited with their family, or perhaps their extended family if someone else in their family was more accepting than their parents. Although not all youth will be able to be reunited with any part of their family. So after I became involved in April, I continued to pay attention to the issues, and we hadn't had a youth placed with us in July, and so I volunteered to become the program director for Safe and Sound. And so I've been helping run the organization since then, building up our Facebook page, website, network of host homes, network of volunteers, network of referrers, finding some new counselors as well. And one of the things that I've tried to do is get approval from LDS Family Services to have youth referred to us. Our approach of taking in youth and trying to reunite them with their families is very much in line with Mormon doctrine, although really the youth shouldn't be kicked out in the first place if people were paying more attention to what Mormon doctrine actually is. The problem is that the doctrine and what has been taught in General Conference have not always been in line, and still there are cases where very hostile messages to the LGBT community are transmitted during conference sessions. So, on the other hand, there can be some very open and supportive messages transmitted too, and we hope that over time the need for an organization such as ourselves will decrease. So we have sort of a dual mission of both creating this network of host homes to take in the youth and to provide education to let not just the Mormon community, but the overall community, because it's not just in the Mormon community that LGBT youth are kicked out. Let them know that you're not helping your children by kicking them out. Being LGBT is not a choice, despite what many years of misstatements would make one believe. And a lot of families think that they're helping their child. They're trying to correct their behavior and be strong and moral and have standards for their kids. But what scientific research has shown, particularly that done by the Family Acceptance Project at San Francisco State University, is that the messages that parents give have a huge impact on the physical and emotional well-being of their children. And by sending messages of acceptance, which is basically coming down to saying, we still love you, we love you unconditionally, regardless of our personal views on homosexuality. But if you can give the message that you still love your child and still care for your child, that can have a tremendous impact on their well-being. Part of the inspiration for the creation of Safe and Sound is the experiences at the Outreach Resource Center. They serve hundreds of youth each year, about a third of them homeless. And so, a lot of youth have learned that in order to survive, they're being asked to have sex with people that are supposedly there to help them. They may be given drugs, even though that's not something that they want to do. They may be involved in crime. It's an extremely difficult life. And another set of people that would come into the Outreach Resource Center would be completely innocent kids who have done nothing more than come to realize what their sexual or gender identity is and come out to their parents. And they find themselves hated and rejected for something that they really have no control over. A lot of times they hate themselves for that. And so the levels of suicide are just terrible among rejected LGBT youth. And what the laws of Utah State are that if you're taking care of a youth for more than 8 hours, you need to be reporting them to the police or child welfare or calling their parents, or otherwise you're harboring a runaway. Now, for a lot of these youth, they might have left a highly abusive situation. Others have just been kicked out, but some have chosen that being homeless is better than the situation that they were in. But for that set of youth that are completely new to the homeless experience, you can't take them in overnight. And at Outreach, they could give them a tent and a sleeping bag and wish them best of luck. And there are not the services that are really needed in the state of Utah. And these kids would head off and might never be seen again. There are predators out there that are looking for these kids and offering them help. Although what that help consists of, who knows? And so the chances for a youth who has no experience with the streets are terrible. And that's why we need to have an option for these kids, a place where they can go, where they can be taken in by a loving family. And that's what Safe and Sound is trying to provide. For a lot of Mormon families, this is a new an unexpected experience, and they're not aware of the science and the current teachings of the church that are very explicit on being accepting of your children. We know that being a supportive parent of an LGBT youth is a new path for a lot of LDS families. And we have, as a family, taken that journey and taken a few steps down that journey. And we will walk with you. If you reach out to us, we'd be glad to talk to you about how to support your child while remaining active in the church.
A lot of the stories you hear about transgender people, and a lot of the stories that I've encountered as well, have been sort of the horror stories, the things where people faced lots of rejection from their families, people who were kicked out of their homes, disowned by their parents, who weren't able to come home again because they had decided to be honest about who they were. And those are the stories that we hear a lot about, and it's certainly important that those stories be told, but it's also important to know that there are happy endings, that there are stories like mine where my parents accepted me, my brothers accepted me, my whole family was very supportive, and that it's getting better, not just for individual people, but for the world at large.
Yeah, I was worried about telling my parents And I actually waited until my older sister could be here with me when I told my parents, so that my sister could kind of be there, supportive, and help answer their questions. But my parents were great. They love Grayson, and they, have tried hard to switch names and switch pronouns.
Which is much harder when you're in your 80s.
That's true. But they've definitely been supportive and been there for him. It's been great. I'm so proud of my parents. I think we have this view of people getting more rigid as they get older, and
because we certainly have.
Yes, but my parents have shown that they could adapt and be great grandparents, even when they're older. Not that they're great grandparents.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my parents are older and they are conservative.
You should tell about your family history.
Oh, that's true. So I didn't actually think of it at the time that Grayson was transitioning, but later I realized that we had some family history that maybe helped my parents to be more understanding. One of my aunts, my Aunt Georgia, worked as a cosmetologist for decades. And
here in Utah?
Yes.
In Salt Lake City?
Yes, and for the later part of her career, she spent most of her time doing electrolysis. That was back in the days before you could do laser hair removal. And so if you needed hair removal, it was done by electrolysis, which is,
one hair at a time.
Oh, yes, brutally slow. And a number of her customers were trans women who were undergoing electrolysis to get, rid of male facial hair so that they would look more feminine. And so I realized afterwards, that my Aunt Georgia had she became good friends with those women as they were transitioning. She spent a lot of time with them and got to hear their stories, and she always spoke about them in a compassionate way. And I think she had opened the door and modeled some of that loving acceptance, 30 years ago, long before we knew that there was going to be a transgender member of our own family. And I'm proud of her and grateful to her, I guess, for having laid that groundwork of understanding that helped my parents.
Well, I guess two things. One is more a story that you would want to tell because about the several family members who offered, if it's too hard to be in Utah,
That was interesting.
Yeah.
When, we told extended family, everyone was supportive, which was great. But what I wasn't expecting was that we had two different relatives who lived in two different parts of California offer to let Grayson move away from Utah and move to California to finish his last year of high school, because they were concerned about his safety here. And I was impressed with, what a loving gesture that was. But I reassured them that we had a good situation for him where school was going to go fine.
Go Nighthawks.
Yeah.
And then in college, you could imagine finding a more accepting environment. You might imagine that you'd find a more accepting environment going to college in California. And yet the University of Utah has been incredibly thoughtful and accepting of Grayson. And I think that if you went to college in California and you were part of the LGBT community, you might find that community was very hostile to Mormons. And if you were part of the Mormon community, you might find that community was hostile to the LGBT community. And here in Utah, you're going to get the larger segment of people who are both LDS and LGBT, and so understand more what Grayson is experiencing and the path that he's trying to walk.
Yeah. And it's so great that Grayson has had the opportunity to be in the Institute Choir at the University of Utah, and he's really loved that experience. And
it's been great to sing baritone.
Yes. Yeah, you started out as a tenor in that choir.
And your church leaders at the university have been very accepting.
In the student wards?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We had the opportunity to march with Mormons Building Bridges in the 2013 Pride Parade. Our whole family, David and I, and all three of our boys marched together as a family in that parade. And it was a chance for us to talk with our feet and talk about our own willingness to walk with LGBT members of the church and to help them feel our love and support and acceptance as we walked down the streets of Salt Lake, and hopefully as we walk in our lives.
And we were walking with the Mormons Building Bridges group with Grayson and Nika holding the banner, the righteous end of the banner, as I refer to it. And were therefore portrayed in the media worldwide as in part of the portrayal of that. And the Mormons Building Bridges group marching in the Pride Parade asked for the theme to be family reunion. And so even though I felt a little odd walking with the Mormon crowd being applauded for being accepting of the LGBT community, I wore my Safe and Sound shirt and agreed to that I would walk with you in the parade, standing up for the group that you founded to help support the LGBT community, and particularly the youth that have been kicked out of their homes.
I'm so grateful for my parents and for all of my family, and I would just like to say that on behalf of all of us people in the LDS Church who are striving to be accepting of people in the LGBT community, that there are more of us than you think, and no matter what, we'll walk with you.